Hello everyone and welcome to a video for the Urban Forest Ecology class at Cell Village. I am your host, Dr. Matthew K. Lau, and in this video I'm going to be covering a few things that we weren't able to get to in classes last week. One of them is going to be the tree of the week. Another one is going to be a little bit of homework for folks that is part of a series of homework assignments that I'm calling a Find Your Forest assignment. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the usefulness of journaling. So let's get going with the tree of the week. So this week, our tree is going to be maple. Maples being any tree species from the genus Acer. And maples, I think most people have an idea of what a maple is, or they at least have an idea of the maple leaf. Certainly, if you're Canadian, you know what the maple leaf looks like because it's emblazoned on your national flag. But a couple of things we're going to cover. First is how to identify a maple, right? So there's lots of species, many species of maples, including the sugar maple, which gives us maple syrup, but then also Norway maple, which is a really common street tree, especially in the East, because Norway maples were planted as often as a replacement for American elms that died as a result of a non-native invasive disease called Dutch elm disease. And those American elms were also largely planted because they were replacing another American native tree species, the American chestnut, that was also killed by an invasive pathogen, the chestnut blight. So we have lots of Norway maples, and this is likely a very common tree species. We talked about in the class how something like 80% of the street trees in and around Newton are maples. I'd be willing to bet that a whole heck of a lot of those maples are Norway maple. In addition to those maples, people might also be familiar with what has become increasingly common, which are Japanese maples. So these are usually smaller maples with very interesting architecture. They've been bred into a huge array of different varieties with different architecture, different colored bark, and different shaped leaves. Often the leaves are very fine and beautiful and wonderfully colored. Both when during the growing season, they can be all sorts of shades of everything from green to red and deep red, almost black. And then their bark ranges from brown all the way to coral colored. So they're really beautiful specimens, and I bet a lot of people are familiar with those maples as well. But so how do you identify a maple? How do you know when you're looking at a maple like tree that it is a maple? Well, there's two very useful characteristics for being pretty certain that you have a maple in North America, but certainly in the Northeast. And the first characteristic is that the leaves are arranged on the branches opposite each other in pairs. So you can see here, I have a picture, I'll zoom in. The leaves here are coming out of this main stem on the opposite sides of each other, right? So here's a pair of leaves coming out here. Further up the branch, there's another pair coming out there. So their petioles, or their little stems, come out of this main branch across from each other. And to show you a contrast, here's another tree species. In this case, this is sweet gum, which looks a whole heck of a lot like a maple. It has palm-shaped or palmate leaves, like many maples do. And then they have their petioles come out of the branch, but they're not in pairs opposite each other. So here, this leaf that I'm pointing at comes down and it hits the branch, but there's nothing on the other side, right? So you have to go down the stem to find another leaf, and then further down the stem to find another leaf. So their petioles are coming out at different locations on this branch. Right? So sweet gums, not maples, right? Another very useful characteristic is that maples all have winged dual seeds. So there's two seeds that are fused to each other, and those seeds have these wing-like shapes. And the scientific, the botanical term for this type of fruit is a samara. So they're dried, they're papery. They don't always have dual wings, but many of them do have this winged shape. And this is characteristic of the genus Acer. And maples, if you can find fruits on them, which oftentimes, if they're not still on the tree themselves, you'll see them underneath of the tree. If you have winged seeds and you have leaves that are opposite each other, right? So here in this picture, we see this maple has the very nice petiole opposite leaf arrangement. If you have both those characteristics, you can be very certain that it is maple. Oh, and if you want to see a sweet gum fruit, you can pester Peter Stringham in the class. He had a really nice tray of sweet gum fruits that he had brought into class. And so, if you have a tree that has alternate leaves, not opposite, but alternate leaves, like I was showing in this photo, right? And you have that tree has fruit that is ball shaped or spiky, you definitely don't have a maple, but you probably have a sweet gum. And check out the fruits that he has, or ask him where he found them. All right, so there's like I was saying, there's a lot of different maples out there, and I don't want to spend the time going over all of the ecology and human uses, but I would like to direct you to a resource that I'm going to constantly refer you to during this class and for the Tree of the Weeks, is this website, Plants for a Future, which hosts a database of information, both ecological and ethnobotanical, so like uses of plants. That is a great resource. So if I can go to their website. So I have a link in my talk, and I'll by the time you're listening and watching this, I will have sent you my notes. So you can access that link, or you can go to pfaf.org. It's pretty simple. Right. So here we can see there's lots of maples. So here's just a few, but then we can see like it goes on for at least 5 other tabs. But one species I wanted us to check out is red maple, which is a native species to the Northeast that we have in lots of our forests. And so here, if you go to one of the species pages at the Plants for a Future, there's all sorts of information. So sort of ecological, agricultural related information, like what USDA hardiness zone, categorization that they fall into, which tells you, what zone that you're in. If you're in the zone that tree grows in, then you have a good chance of success if you plant that tree, at least from the perspective of climate. You're not going to kill the tree by a frost or too much heat. But anyway, so there's information like that, but then there's also information on things like edibility or other human uses, weed potential, and medicinal rating. So what medicinal properties it has. So there's lots of great information on this website, and most species have some amount of information here. They've done a great job collecting very disparate sources of information and putting them in one place. And so it's really, really a great resource. So some of the edible uses, most people are familiar that maple syrup, if it's real maple syrup, comes from the sugar maple tree usually. But many maples, other than the sugar maple, also get tapped to make syrup, and red maple is one of those trees. And the sap is I think not as concentrated as the sugar maple sap, but I've spoken with people who sugar in the wintertime, and they will still tap red maples if they have them in their sugar bush. But then there's other uses that the edible uses that the tree has. Some people at some point have eaten the seeds cooked with the wings removed. Once the seeds have been boiled, and they were apparently eaten hot. And so, whatever reference this is, it could tell you more about who that was that did that, and maybe someone else who might have done that, and how it tasted. Then there's also some information about the potential medicinal uses, at least what the plant has been reported to have medicinal applications for. So apparently, someone has used it as an astringent to help with eye soreness. Whether or not that's a legitimate treatment, or whether or not it's been validated by some other more reliable medical establishment is, you'd have to consult this link here. It's not necessarily backed up by the FDA or the USDA, so you have to really be careful about whatever these recommendations or statements might be. But the information is there, and you can investigate it for yourself and find out more about it. And then other uses that there might be other interesting things in the other uses category. I found this really interesting, that the leaves of the red maple used to be used apparently to pack crops like apples and root crops to help preserve them. Maybe that was a physical, like a packing sort of packing peanut before they had packing peanuts, or maybe it was some chemicals that were released. I'm not sure. We'd have to check out those links. But anyway, that was another interesting thing. So Plants for a Future, they have all sorts of great information. So I highly recommend going through and checking out the information on the other maple species that they have in the database when you get a chance to. All right, so the next thing I wanted to cover is the homework. So now, if you've watched the other video on using Google Street View as a virtual guide to urban forests, and now that we've gone over the Plants for a Future in the Tree of the Week, so the homework that I would like in this series of the Find Your Forest assignments is, for this one, I would like you to go out either in real life or via Google, and find a tree that's interesting to you for whatever reason. Maybe you just like the shape of it. Maybe you think it's pretty. Maybe it's a tree that you have a memory of, or maybe it's something historic. Or maybe it's just like we've talked about in class. Maybe it's a tree that is causing you some issues. Anyway, take a picture of that tree, and maybe and maybe think about why it's interesting to you, and send me that in an email. Right, so take a picture of it. Either if you can get out there and take a picture of it in person, that's great. Or if not, take a screenshot on your computer and send that to me at my email address, mlau@lasalle.edu. And I'll take a look at them, and we can process them and share them in class, or just share them back and forth via email. And this is, I think, a really good way to get us engaged on a personal level with our urban forests. Some good places to check out as you're looking for interesting trees. Just as a suggestion, if you're having some trouble, brainstorming where you should look, some great places to find cool trees in the urban environment are public campuses, either like university, college campuses, or even private business campuses will have cool plantings or interesting plantings of sometimes sometimes unique trees. Also, cemeteries are interestingly a great place to find interesting trees. Mount Auburn Cemetery is essentially an arboretum in and of itself. And golf courses are also sometimes interesting, will have interesting plantings, or if nothing else, there are a lot of people that go to golf courses and sometimes will take pictures. So there'll be a lot of data from golf courses. And similarly, parks and also arboretums are also potential places where you can go and check out. And not only will there be Google Street data for that location, if you're going there virtually, there's lots of data from those locations. But then they also often have really interesting trees. Or if you're going out in real life, and right now it's really a great time to make sure you get out there and get your outdoors time in as the weather's good. Go check out these places and take some photos for your Find Your Forest assignment. Last thing I'd like to cover is just a couple notes about keeping a journal. So I recommend, this class is for you. So what experience you want to take away from this class is up to you. I do recommend that everyone takes up the practice of keeping a journal, and in particular, a nature journal is a great way to engage with the natural world and just the world in general, even the built world and the world of people. For scientists, journals are indispensable, and in particular for ecologists, they are extremely useful for two reasons. The first being that they make us focus, right? They make us slow down and they make us pay attention to things. And often it makes us pay attention to things that we would otherwise overlook. And those are often places that interesting things can happen because people are often not paying attention to them. Another reason that ecologists find journaling very useful is that it allows us to record observations over longer time periods. So we can make inference and think about processes that might occur over days or weeks, months, years, sometimes even upwards of a century or more if those journals are passed on to other people. Right. So those are the two things for ecologists, naturalists, two reasons for keeping a journal. And so I recommend two books if you want to get more information if you don't already keep a journal, or if you want to get more perspectives on how to keep a journal. Keeping a Nature Journal by Claire Walker Leslie and Charles E. Roth is a great book. That's the picture that we're looking at here. It's really great for all ages, and it focuses a lot on illustrations. So if drawing, painting is something that you're interested in, this might be a good book for you. So it combines keeping a written journal with more visual arts as well. The other book I recommend is sort of at the other end of the spectrum. It's not about nature specifically. It's very not focused on the visual arts. It's more organizational and sort of life orienting. But the Bullet Journal Method book by Ryder Carroll, it was kind of a phenomenon that I think he gave a TED talk, and the method though. Aside from all the hype that the book got over the last couple of years and this method got, I've found that it's actually very good to just focus your thinking, right? So it's also it's a very specific method of journaling, but it can be a really good, efficient method for journaling, whether that is for your life or it is specifically for engaging with the natural world. All right, so with that, I think that's it. We've covered everything, and so hopefully you all get out there, and whether you're journaling or not, get engaged with your forest through our Finding Your Forest activity and learn more about maples.